Would you suspect your stepdad was secretly destroying your business with fake reviews and illegal recordings? I never thought I would be crops behind my own food truck at 6 in the morning, setting up a hidden camera to catch my stepfather red-handed, but here I was, and honestly, it felt like the only sane thing I had done in months. Let me back up and tell you how I got here, because this whole mess started with what I thought was the best decision of my life, and turned into a nightmare that nearly destroyed everything I had worked for. My name is Zara Al-Rashid, and up until 8 months ago, I was just another marketing coordinator at a mid-sized tech company in Portland, spending my days writing email campaigns for software I barely understood and my evenings dreaming about something more. The something more turned out to be Nomad Bowls, my Mediterranean fusion food truck that I launched with $45,000 borrowed from my mother's retirement fund and 8 years of pent-up culinary ambition. The truck itself was beautiful, a converted Airstream with a custom kitchen setup that could pump out lamb shawarma bowls, falafel wraps, and my signature honey harissa cauliflower faster than most restaurants. I had spent months perfecting recipes that combined my Palestinian grandmother's techniques with Korean flavors I picked up from my college roommate, plus some California influences that just made sense in Portland. The business plan was solid. I had secured spots near 3 different university campuses, and my soft opening had lines of hungry college students wrapped around the block. For the first 2 months, everything was perfect. I was making more money than I ever had at my corporate job, my Instagram was blowing up with food photos, and I finally felt like I was building something that mattered. My mother, Amira, was incredibly proud, even though I could tell she was nervous about the money. She had always been supportive of my dreams, ever since my father passed away when I was 16, and seeing her retirement fund go toward my business felt like the ultimate vote of confidence. The problem was Jim. Jim Kowalski had married my mother 3 years ago, and while I tried to be happy for her, the man drove me absolutely insane. He was 58 years old, worked as a middle management insurance adjuster, and had opinions about everything, especially my life choices. From day one, he made it clear that he thought my business degree was being wasted on what he called playing with a food cart. He would constantly bring up articles about failed restaurants, mention how most small businesses fail within 5 years, and ask when I was planning to get back to real work with benefits. The worst part was how he talked to my mother about it. I would hear him in the kitchen, voice carrying through the thin apartment walls, saying things like, "She is going to lose all your money, Amira, and this food truck thing is just a phase, she needs to grow up." Mom would defend me, but I could tell his constant negativity was wearing her down. Still, I thought his disapproval was just typical stepfather stuff, annoying but ultimately harmless. I focused on my business, ignored his comments, and figured he would come around once I started making serious money. That's when the problem started. It began with small things, weird coincidences that I initially brushed off. A health inspector showed up on a random Tuesday, claiming they had received an anonymous complaint about food safety. They found nothing wrong, but it cost me a full day of sales while they poked around my immaculate kitchen. Then my Yelp reviews started getting flooded with 1-star ratings from accounts with no profile pictures, all claiming the food gave them food poisoning or that I was rude to customers. The reviews were clearly fake, anyone could see that, but they were detailed enough to sound plausible. One claimed I had served undercooked chicken, which was ridiculous since I didn't even serve chicken. Another said I had yelled at a customer's child, complete with a story about how I had allegedly thrown a tantrum when they asked for no onions. These reviews were coming in faster than the real ones, and my overall rating was dropping fast. Then the permit issues started. Apparently, someone had been calling the city with complaints about my truck blocking sidewalks, even when I was parked in designated food truck zones with all the proper permits displayed. Each complaint triggered an investigation, which meant more lost time and more paperwork to file. The pattern was getting impossible to ignore. Every single incident happened on weekdays during lunch hours, which were my busiest and most profitable times. Someone was targeting me specifically, and they knew my schedule well enough to time their sabotage for maximum damage. I started keeping a notebook, tracking every incident and trying to figure out who might have it out for me. Other food truck owners in the area were supportive in dealing with their own challenges, but nothing like what I was experiencing. My regular customers were loyal and loved the food, so it wasn't coming from them. The timing was too precise to be random complaints from angry neighbors. 3 months into this harassment campaign, I was exhausted and paranoid. My sales were down 30% because of the constant interruptions, and I was spending more time dealing with bureaucracy than actually cooking. The university contracts I had worked so hard to secure were starting to look shaky, since the schools needed reliable vendors who could actually show up without getting shut down by health inspectors. The breaking point came on a Thursday in late September. I was prepping for the lunch rush at Portland State when 2 health inspectors showed up, claiming they had received a complaint about rats in my truck. This was particularly devastating because I kept my truck spotless. It was my pride and joy, and the idea of rodents anywhere near my food made me physically sick. They spent 4 hours going through everything, taking apart equipment, checking every corner with flashlights, and treating me like I was running some kind of underground rat kitchen. Of course, they found nothing, because there was nothing to find, but by the time they left, I had missed the entire lunch rush and lost probably $800 in sales. That evening, I was sitting in my apartment, staring at my laptop screen and the latest batch of fake reviews, when my phone rang. It was my mother, and she sounded worried. "Zara, honey, Jim showed me some things online about your truck. Are you having problems with the health department?" My heart sank. "What did he show you?" "He found some reviews that sound really concerning. People saying they got sick from your food, and something about rats. He's worried that you might be in over your head." I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. "Mom, those reviews are fake. Someone is trying to sabotage my business. The health department has inspected me 4 times in 3 months and found absolutely nothing wrong." 4 times? Zara, that doesn't sound normal. It's not normal. That's what I'm trying to tell you. Someone is calling in fake complaints. There was a long pause. "Jim thinks maybe you should consider getting a job with benefits again, just until you figure out what's going wrong with the truck." And there it was. Jim's endgame was starting to become clear. He wanted me to fail, and he wanted my mother to pressure me into giving up. "Mom, I'm not giving up. This is my business, and I'm going to figure out who's doing this." After I hung up, I sat there feeling more alone than I had since starting this whole venture. The person sabotaging me wasn't just trying to destroy my business, they were undermining my relationship with my mother, the one person whose support I needed most. That's when I decided to fight back. I started by setting up a Google alert for my business name and began tracking every fake review more carefully. I noticed that most of them were posted between 9 and 11 in the morning on weekdays, and they all had a similar writing style, lots of exclamation points and the same kind of phrasing. Someone was sitting at a computer during normal business hours, creating fake accounts and writing detailed lies about my food truck. I also started paying attention to the timing of the health department complaints. They always seemed to come on days when I had posted my location on social media, usually about an hour after I announced where I would be. That meant whoever was doing this was following my social media accounts and watching my schedule. The breakthrough came when I decided to create a fake social media account to see if I could trace who was monitoring my posts. I set up a dummy Instagram account with no followers and started watching the list of people who viewed my stories. Most of the accounts were regular customers and food bloggers I recognized, but there was one account that kept showing up, a profile with no posts and a generic username. When I clicked on the profile, my blood ran cold. The account was following exactly 3 people: my business account, my personal account, and my mother's account. Someone was specifically tracking my family's social media activity. I screenshot everything and started building a file. The fake reviews, the suspicious social media account, the pattern of health department complaints, all of it was adding up to a deliberate campaign of harassment. But I still didn't know who was behind it. The answer came from an unexpected source. I was at a coffee shop near my mother's apartment, working on my laptop and trying to figure out how to handle the situation, when I overheard a conversation at the next table. 2 women were talking about online reviews, and one of them mentioned how easy it was to create fake accounts. "My husband does it for his business," she said. "He creates fake reviews for competitors to drive their ratings down. It's terrible, but apparently lots of people do it." That's when it hit me. The person sabotaging me had to be someone who understood online reputation management, someone who knew how to create convincing fake reviews and navigate bureaucratic complaint systems. They also had to be someone with enough free time during business hours to monitor my social media and make phone calls to city departments. Jim worked in insurance, which meant he spent his days dealing with fraud investigations and paperwork. He would know exactly how to file official complaints and make them sound legitimate. He was also constantly online during work hours. I had seen him on Facebook and news websites whenever I visited my mother's apartment. The more I thought about it, the more everything pointed to Jim. He had motive, he had opportunity, and he had the skills to pull off this kind of systematic harassment. Plus, his sudden interest in showing my mother negative reviews about my business was way too convenient. I needed proof, though. Suspicion wasn't enough, especially when it came to accusing my mother's husband of trying to destroy my livelihood. That's when I remembered something my tech company coworkers had taught me about digital forensics. If Jim was creating fake accounts to leave reviews, there might be a digital trail I could follow. I spent the next weekend learning everything I could about IP address tracking and online investigation techniques. What I found was even worse than I had imagined. Using some basic online tools and publicly available information, I was able to trace several of the fake review accounts back to the same IP address, which belonged to Jim's insurance company. He was literally using his work computer to sabotage my business during office hours. But that wasn't the most shocking discovery. While I was digging into his online activity, I found something that made my stomach turn. Jim had been recording my phone conversations. I discovered this completely by accident when I was looking through public records related to the health department complaints. One of the complaint forms included an audio attachment, which seemed weird since complaints were usually just written statements. When I played the file, I heard my own voice having a heated phone conversation with a supplier about a late delivery. The conversation had happened in my apartment, and the only way someone could have recorded it was if they had been listening to my phone calls somehow. The audio quality was too good to be from someone overhearing me through walls. It sounded like it was recorded directly from my phone. I felt sick. This wasn't just business sabotage anymore. This was stalking and invasion of privacy on a level I hadn't even imagined. Jim hadn't just been trying to hurt my business, he had been systematically violating my privacy to build some kind of case against me. I spent the next few days in a paranoid haze, wondering what else he might have been recording. Had he been listening to personal conversations with friends? Phone calls with potential investors? Private moments I thought were completely secure. The violation felt overwhelming, but it also gave me something I hadn't had before, evidence of criminal activity. Recording someone's phone conversations without consent is illegal in Oregon, and using that information to harass someone's business ventures could qualify as stalking under state law. I had him. The question was what to do with the information. I could go to the police, but that would mean potentially sending my mother's husband to jail, which would destroy my relationship with her. I could confront him directly, but that would give him a chance to destroy evidence and come up with explanations. Then I remembered what Jim cared about most, his reputation. He was obsessed with appearing respectable and successful, constantly bragging about his job and his role in various community organizations. He was particularly proud of his standing with my mother's book club, a group of women his age who met monthly and had become an important part of his social life. That's when I came up with my plan. My mother's book club was scheduled to meet at our apartment the following Tuesday evening for their monthly discussion. Jim always made a point of joining them for dinner beforehand, playing the perfect host and showing off his cooking skills. It was one of the few times I had seen him genuinely happy, and I knew how much he valued their good opinion of him. I decided to set a trap. First, I needed to catch him in the act of making one of his sabotage calls. I bought a small hidden camera online, the kind used for home security, and planned to install it in my mother's apartment when they were both out. The tricky part was timing it right. I needed Jim to be making one of his fake complaint calls during a time when I could record him, but I also needed to make sure my mother wouldn't be around to witness the confrontation I was planning. I got my opportunity the following Monday. Mom called to tell me she was going to visit her sister for the afternoon, and Jim would be working from home. This was perfect, since his pattern was to make his harassment calls during late morning when he thought I would be busy with lunch prep. I drove over to their apartment and let myself in with my spare key. The place was empty. Jim's car was in the driveway, but he wasn't home, probably out running errands. I had about an hour to set up the camera before he returned. I chose a spot in the kitchen where the camera would have a clear view of the living room where Jim usually sat with his laptop. The device was tiny, about the size of a USB drive, and I was able to hide it behind a decorative bowl on the counter. I tested the angle and the audio quality, then set it to start recording automatically when it detected motion. The hard part was waiting. I went back to my apartment and tried to focus on prep work for the next day's lunch service, but I couldn't concentrate. Every few minutes I checked the camera's app on my phone, waiting to see if Jim had come home. Around 10:30 in the morning, I got an alert that the camera had started recording. I opened the app and watched as Jim walked into the kitchen, grabbed a cup of coffee, and settled down at the dining room table with his laptop. For about 20 minutes, he just seemed to be doing normal work stuff, typing and clicking around on his computer. I was starting to think maybe this wasn't going to work, when suddenly he picked up his phone and dialed a number. "Yes, I'd like to file a complaint about a food truck that's been operating illegally in the downtown area," he said, and my heart started racing. I watched in horrified fascination as he gave a completely fabricated account of my truck violating health codes. He claimed he had witnessed me serving food without gloves, said there were flies around my service window, and mentioned seeing me dump grease in a storm drain, which I had never done and would never do. The entire call lasted about 8 minutes, and Jim's performance was Oscar-worthy. He sounded like a concerned citizen reporting legitimate health violations, complete with specific details and fake concern for public safety. If I hadn't known better, I would have believed him myself. But I had it all on video, clear footage of Jim deliberately lying to government officials in order to damage my business. The recording quality was perfect. You could see his face clearly and hear every word he said. After he finished the call, I watched him open his laptop and navigate to Yelp, where he proceeded to create another fake account and write a detailed 1-star review claiming I had been rude to elderly customers. He even took the time to create a fake backstory about bringing his mother to try my food and being appalled by my alleged behavior. I had everything I needed. The next evening was the book club meeting, and I spent the entire day preparing for what I knew would be one of the most difficult conversations of my life. I copied the video to several devices, wrote out a timeline of all the harassment incidents, and practiced what I was going to say. When I arrived at my mother's apartment at 6 o'clock, the book club ladies were already there, chatting over appetizers and wine. Jim was in full host mode, telling stories and making everyone laugh. My mother looked happy and relaxed in a way I hadn't seen in months. For a moment, I almost lost my nerve. These women had become important to my mother, and Jim's behavior toward them seemed genuinely warm and caring. Was I about to destroy something good in my mother's life just to get revenge? But then I remembered the recording of my private phone conversation, the $45,000 of my mother's retirement money that was at risk, and the months of systematic harassment that had nearly driven me to bankruptcy. Jim had made his choice when he decided to wage war against my business and invade my privacy. Now he had to face the consequences. I waited until after dinner, when everyone was settled in the living room with their wine and discussing the month's book selection. Then I stood up and cleared my throat. "I'm sorry to interrupt, but I have something important I need to share with everyone." My mother looked surprised. "Zara, what's wrong?" "For the past several months, someone has been sabotaging my business. Fake reviews, false complaints to the health department, harassment that has cost me thousands of dollars and nearly destroyed everything I've worked for." The room got quiet, and I could see the book club ladies exchanging concerned glances. "I've been investigating, trying to figure out who would want to hurt me like this, and I finally found proof." I pulled out my tablet and opened the video file. This was recorded yesterday morning in this apartment. I hit play, and everyone watched in stunned silence as Jim made his fake complaint call to the health department. The audio was crystal clear, and there was no mistaking what he was doing. The reaction was immediate and devastating. Several of the women gasped audibly, and I could see the shock and disgust on their faces. My mother went completely pale and covered her mouth with her hand. But Jim's reaction was the most telling. Instead of denying it or expressing surprise, he immediately went on the attack. "You recorded me in my own home? That's illegal surveillance. I could have you arrested." "Actually, Jim, what's illegal is recording someone else's phone conversations without their consent," I replied, keeping my voice steady. "Which you've been doing to me for months." I played the audio file of my recorded phone conversation, the one that had been attached to one of his health department complaints. My mother's eyes went wide as she recognized my voice discussing business matters that should have been completely private. "You've been listening to my phone calls and using them to build false cases against my business. You've cost me tens of thousands of dollars in lost revenue, put my permits at risk, and betrayed my mother's trust by sabotaging an investment she made in my future." The room was dead silent except for the sound of one of the book club ladies quietly setting down her wine glass. Jim tried to mount a defense. I was trying to protect your mother's investment. This food truck nonsense was going to fail anyway. I was just trying to make it happen faster so she wouldn't lose even more money. By committing fraud and invasion of privacy? By lying to government officials and creating fake reviews? My mother finally found her voice. Jim, is this true? Have you been doing this to Zara's business? He looked around the room at the faces of women he had been trying to impress for 3 years, women who now saw him as a liar and a saboteur, and I could see him realize that his carefully constructed image was completely destroyed. I was protecting our family, he said weakly. Our family? My mother stood up, and I had never seen her so angry. Zara is our family. What you did is cruel and illegal and completely unforgivable. One of the book club ladies, Mrs. Henderson, spoke up for the first time. I think we should go. This is clearly a family matter that needs to be resolved privately. As the women filed out of the apartment, I could hear them whispering to each other in the hallway. Jim's reputation in their social circle was completely ruined, and word would spread quickly through their community. He would never be able to show his face at another book club meeting or any of their other social events. After everyone left, my mother turned to Jim with a look I had never seen before. Pack your things. I want you out of this apartment tonight. Amira, please, let me explain. Explain what? How you've been systematically destroying our daughter's business. How you've been lying to me for months. How you violated her privacy and committed crimes to try to force her to fail. Jim tried several different approaches, apologizing, making excuses, blaming me for provoking him, but my mother shut down every attempt. The $45,000 you wanted me to pressure Zara into paying back? You're going to repay it yourself. Every penny. And if I find out you've done anything else to hurt her business, I'll make sure everyone in this city knows exactly what kind of man you are. It took Jim 3 hours to pack his belongings and move out. During that time, he tried twice to approach me and apologize, but I had nothing to say to him. The damage he had caused went far beyond money or business problems. He had violated my privacy and tried to destroy something I had built with my own hands. The last thing he said to me as he carried his final box to his car was, I hope you realize this means your mother is going to end up broke and alone. No, I replied, it means she's going to end up free of someone who was willing to commit crimes to control her family. After Jim left, my mother and I sat in her kitchen and had the longest, most honest conversation we had shared since my father died. She apologized for not seeing what was happening sooner, for letting Jim's negativity influence her feelings about my business, and for not standing up for me more forcefully. I should have known, she kept saying. I should have seen the signs. Mom, he was manipulating both of us. The important thing is that it's over now. She insisted on calling her financial advisor the next morning to figure out how to protect the loan money and make sure Jim couldn't access any of her accounts. She also offered to increase the loan amount to help me recover from the damage he had caused, but I declined. I wanted to rebuild my business on my own terms. The aftermath was better than I had hoped for. Within a week of Jim's departure, the fake reviews stopped appearing and I stopped getting harassing calls from government inspectors. My Yelp rating slowly climbed back up as real customers left genuine reviews, and word spread through the food truck community about what had happened to me. Other food truck owners reached out to offer support, and several of them shared stories about similar harassment they had experienced. It turned out that sabotage between competitors was more common than I had realized, though Jim's level of systematic harassment was extreme even by those standards. The university contracts I had been worried about losing actually became stronger than ever. When the catering directors found out what had been happening, they were furious that someone had been interfering with their vendor relationships. They extended my contracts for an additional year and recommended me to other schools in the region. 3 months after the confrontation, Nomad Bowls was more successful than it had ever been. I had expanded to 5 different campus locations, hired 2 part-time employees, and was generating enough profit to start paying my mother back ahead of schedule. The business was featured in Portland Monthly magazine as one of the city's most innovative food trucks, and I was invited to speak at a small business conference about overcoming obstacles. Jim, meanwhile, had apparently moved back in with his elderly mother in Beaverton and was working for a different insurance company. According to my mother, who heard through mutual acquaintances, his reputation in their former social circle never recovered from the book club incident. The story of his sabotage campaign had spread throughout their community, and he had become something of a pariah. The legal consequences were less dramatic than I had hoped. I consulted with a lawyer about pressing charges for the illegal recording and harassment, but was told that proving damages would be difficult and expensive. Instead, I settled for having a cease and desist letter sent to Jim's new address, making it clear that any future interference with my business would result in immediate legal action. My mother never heard from Jim again after he moved out, which was exactly what she wanted. She threw herself into her book club activities and started taking pottery classes, seeming happier and more energetic than she had been during the entire 3 years of her marriage. She also became my business's biggest champion, bringing her friends to try my food and posting enthusiastic reviews on social media. The experience taught me several important lessons about family, business, and standing up for yourself. I learned that sometimes the biggest threats to your success come from the people closest to you, and that protecting your dreams might require making difficult decisions about relationships. I also learned that documentation is everything. If I hadn't taken the time to track the pattern of harassment and gather evidence, I never would have been able to prove what Jim was doing. The hidden camera was the key piece of evidence that made everything else believable. Most importantly, I learned that my mother's love and support were stronger than I had given them credit for. I had been afraid that confronting Jim would force her to choose between us, but when she saw the truth about what he had been doing, there was no contest. Family loyalty, it turned out, meant protecting each other from people who would harm us, even if those people had somehow become part of the family themselves. Today, 18 months after that horrible Tuesday evening when everything came to light, Nomad Bowls is thriving beyond my wildest expectations. I have 4 trucks operating across the Portland metro area, a catering business that serves corporate events and weddings, and I'm in talks with investors about opening a brick-and-mortar restaurant. The $45,000 loan from my mother's retirement fund has been completely repaid, with interest, and I've been able to help her invest in some additional retirement savings to make up for the money she lost during her divorce proceedings. Sometimes I run into people who knew Jim from their insurance company or social circles, and they always ask what happened to him. I don't go into details, but I do make it clear that he made some choices that hurt people I care about, and that there were consequences for those choices. The hidden camera is still in my kitchen drawer, not because I expect to need it again, but as a reminder that sometimes protecting what you've built requires being willing to fight for it, even when the fight is uncomfortable and complicated. I still think about that morning when I was crouched behind my food truck, setting up surveillance equipment to catch my stepfather in the act of sabotaging my business. At the time, it felt desperate and slightly crazy. Now, it feels like the moment I decided to stop being a victim and start being someone who wouldn't let other people destroy what I had worked so hard to create. If there's one piece of advice I would give to other entrepreneurs dealing with similar situations, it's this: trust your instincts when something feels wrong, document everything, and don't be afraid to stand up for yourself even when it means confronting people you care about. Sometimes the people who claim to have your best interests at heart are actually your biggest obstacles, and recognizing that truth is the first step toward protecting your future. My business is stronger now because I learned how to fight for it. My relationship with my mother is deeper because we went through something difficult together and came out the other side. And I sleep better at night knowing that I didn't let someone else's fears and limitations define what I was capable of achieving. The Mediterranean fusion bowls are still as delicious as ever, by the way. And yes, we still get 5-star reviews, but now I know they're all real.